Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Student Insider podcast. I am joined, of course, once again by Alex. But today we have a very special guest. We are joined by Radha Rü, who is one of the finalists on the MasterChef. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
So, hi everyone. My name is Radha, but obviously my nickname is Rü. So, Radha Rü, Chef Rü. And I was on MasterChef, so you've probably seen my face on the recent episodes of MasterChef, and I was in the final three, and I came runner-up. So, yeah, a really, really exciting experience. But I guess, like, the one thing, which is why I'm doing this podcast, is because I'm also a recent graduate. So, like, I can relate to, the student life and everything that you could possibly be going on and, everything that's going on at uni at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks a lot for joining. Thanks a lot for taking the time out of your day to join us on the podcast. Was it actually, quick question before we dive in, is like, because I saw you were like a student, like a graduate that was on MasterChef. Was you like one of the youngest people to be on the show then?
Yeah, so there was like different heats, and within my heat, I was the youngest sort of competitor. I think there were people throughout the entire competition who were like similar age to me, but within my heat, and especially from the semis and onwards, I was definitely the youngest by far.
Wow, that's really cool actually. Yeah.
Just to sort of give some more background on the sort of that. From what I read, I did a tiny bit of stalking on some articles, and I believe it was law that you studied, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I did a law graduate at the University of Huddersfield, so that's like up north, like near Leeds. And I wasn't sort of expected to do law. I think I wanted to actually do medicine when I was at school. So I did A levels of English literature, biology, chemistry, and religious studies and ethics. And then I actually dropped both biology and chemistry in my ASs, picked up politics, did politics within a year, and then I was left with politics, religious studies and ethics, and English literature. And I was like, okay, well, what can I do with these handful of A levels? And then I went into law. So yeah, it wasn't expected, but did a law degree, and I've gained so much from that law degree. Like, it's definitely not been wasted at all.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So I guess you get the perspective of like the law in general by studying law, because I've definitely heard from people that I know that study law a lot of reading, like so much reading. Is that true? Can you verify that?
Yes, I can definitely verify that. There is like so much reading, but I think with like any sort of studying that you do, if you want to be good in your field and if you want to sort of stand out, there's so much background reading with anything now. But yeah, there was a lot of reading.
Absolutely. So if we could dive into like, could you give us like an overview of your experience of being on MasterChef, and
Yeah.
perhaps like including like any lessons you learned along the way, and maybe also like a bit of perspective of like before, during, and after?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, definitely. So like, obviously, making the final of the MasterChef program, it was such a high for me. I've always watched MasterChef, like even when I was younger, like it would be sort of like a little family gathering, but like, oh, MasterChef's on, let's all gather around, watch it on TV. So I didn't even think I would ever make it onto the show, let alone to the final three. I mean, bearing in mind, I've only been cooking like during the first lockdown, so I moved back home from uni and started cooking. So like it was a massive, massive like experience for me just to like even be picked and to be on the telly. But like it really, really boosted my confidence, and it it made me believe that okay, I can actually maybe potentially have the ability to go into the food industry and become a chef, like go into that. Never would have expected it in my entire life, but yeah, it was amazing to be able to showcase because I'm vegetarian as well. So it was amazing for me to be able to go onto a program which has predominantly been meat based for quite a while, and to be able to sort of like showcase vegetarian food and like my journey as well of just going from like this shy little person who doesn't have much confidence and self belief, just like sort of gaining experience, being in the kitchen, growing, and I think you can see that from like my first episode through to the last episode I was on. I think you can definitely sort of like see that journey develop. Um, and then like obviously, you know, the whole experience. You hear everyone say, "Oh, it was a roller coaster of emotions," but it really, really was because it's like you're competing against other people, but at the same time, you're also competing against yourself because you're only as good as your last cook at the end of the day, and you don't want to let yourself down. And you obviously want to showcase your best qualities as much as you possibly can. So for me, it was very difficult, especially when it came to the invention tasks, because I had to like think on my feet. And because I've only been cooking for such a short amount of time, I didn't obviously have that experience of like opening the fridge and being like, okay, what have we got in the fridge tonight? What can we cook? Because it was always up to mum and dad to sort of do that. You know, I never sort of had to do that ever. So that for me was quite difficult. But I think what gave me the most confidence was when I heard feedback from like, you know, the likes of John and Greg and like the guest judges that came in, being like my foods, you know, like it's delicious and my desserts could already like grace a fine dining restaurant. I think for me that gave me just that boost of confidence that I needed. And yeah, it was incredible. And I think one thing that really sums up my MasterChef journey is a little quote, which is from my favourite film when I was younger, and it probably still is, but it's Ratatouille. And the quote is, it's from Chef Gasto, and it's like, anyone can cook. It's like that whole statement, like, anyone can cook, but only the fearless can be great. And I think, like, that little saying from that film just really sums up my entire MasterChef journey, really.
Oh, I love that quote. It's a great film as well.
Yeah, really good film. It's really funny to me that that's like the one of the quotes, because I really enjoyed that quote myself when I watched the movie. It's like the whole like theme of the film is about like anyone can cook.
Exactly. And I think as well, like, I think cooking's all, like, it's got that perception of, oh, like, I'm going to stay away from that because, like, I'm not going to be good enough at it. But it's like, you don't need to be good enough. Like, food should be enjoyed. Like, you should be able to get in the kitchen and have fun, and then like it should be an enjoyable experience. Like, it shouldn't feel like a chore to have to cook dinner. And as well, I think people are scared that they're expected when they go in the kitchen, they have to sort of like produce like a 3-starred course, and it's like, you don't. As long as you're in the kitchen, you're having fun and you're producing something, it doesn't matter what it is, whether that be like taking a humble vegetable like a cauliflower, or you know, using a really really sort of like expensive piece of meat or fish. Like, it doesn't matter, just as long as you're in the kitchen and you're having fun and you're being creative.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting that you said, so you started like really cooking in one of the first lockdowns, and then to being on MasterChef. That's like, how did like that learning experience look? Because I feel like there was like, it's a short amount of time to be
Big
on
jump.
like where there's a like a people, there's a people that have maybe been doing the same thing for maybe like many years or something like that.
So what it was I moved back home from uni. I was in my final year. I was doing my final exams. I was upstairs in my bedroom, and I was like, okay, I need like a break. Like, this revision is getting too much for me. I need a break. So I was like, well, what can I do? And obviously gyms were closed, sports centres weren't, like, you know, sports clubs and everything wasn't happening. So I was like, okay, well, I need to do something within my own house, like within my own home. And my mum and dad, like the industries of work they're both in. So my dad works for university and my mum works for the NHS herself. So they were extremely busy. And it got to the point where it was like 8 o'clock, 8:30, and no one had even think about cooking dinner. So I was like, okay, let me go downstairs, let me get in the kitchen. It's a way that I can sort of like have a break from studying and reading so many case laws. And it also means that if dinner's cooked, my mum and dad don't have to do it. And that's one less thing for them to worry about. So I started being in the kitchen, and I really, really loved it. Like, I was actually really, really enjoying, and the food that I was cooking was actually, you know, it was actually quite good. And then I saw an advert on TV being like, applications open for MasterChef now, and I thought, okay, I'm not like fully enjoying my law degree. Like, I will do it, I will complete it, but I don't want to be a lawyer when I'm older. That decision's already been made. Like, I'm not going to fully enjoy it. And I was like, I'm enjoying cooking. I'm loving what I'm doing in the kitchen. What have I got to lose? Let's put in an application. Let's see what happens. And that was basically the process. It was as sort of smooth and simple as that. Just a simple little advert that I saw on TV, and I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's put in an application. Didn't expect anything at all from it. And it just sort of like magically happened. Like, even looking back now, I feel very, very lucky and privileged that, you know, it was sort of like in my favour essentially. But yeah, it was incredible.
I must say, like, it's very inspiring to sort of, you know, have the confidence. I mean, first of all, to see like and notice like in yourself that you're not really enjoying like something that you've spent, you know, 3 years or maybe more like studying for like a law degree, and then deciding, you know what, this isn't really what I want to do. I think that's a very like it requires like a lot of like confidence to do something like that at first.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think as well, like for a lot of students, if you like think back, like to your, well, even to your GCSEs, we were like 16 when we had to pick GCSEs, and it's like at that young age, you've got to already decide what you want to do with your life. And I feel like even for me, like when I was sort of like at that age, I was like, well, I don't actually know what I want to do, and I've got to sort of like base my GCSEs on this, base my A levels on this, go to university. And I feel like a lot of people are quite afraid to sort of be like, hold their hands up and say, okay, I'm not enjoying life, I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, I want a career change. Because they don't want to obviously disappoint their family, upset themselves. I think, yeah, but I do think it takes a lot of confidence to be like, you know what, I'm not enjoying this, I'm going to have a career change. But it's one that I think people need to sort of like face, because at the end of the day, no one wants to do something they're not enjoying. And
hmm.
opportunities will come and will arise, even if you don't think they are. They will come and they will sort of like open up to you.
Absolutely. I think like something I was reading up upon not too long ago is like, especially related to that, if people like the more time they spend in a career, the harder it becomes to make a change, because it's like that like sunk cost is like you put all this time, money, energy into like a specific industry, and it's like it becomes harder to then, okay, I know I want to do something else, but it's like more resistance to it. And I think
Yeah.
like the courage to do it is like the hardest bit, but it's got the most rewards on the other end.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, it is. It's like if you're in a job or a career or something for such a long time, it's almost like, okay, I've done it for this amount of time now. I'm just going to sort of like go through the motions. And it's like life shouldn't be about that. It should be about having fun, like waking up in the morning and genuinely doing a job that you enjoy. So yeah, I'm now happy that I can sort of like wake up in the morning and go in the kitchen and just do it and enjoy it now.
Yeah, there's definitely like very inspiring, as like I mentioned at the beginning. And I guess as well, like it does also take a lot of courage to sort of having been in lockdown and sort of just doing this cooking at home. I mean, I haven't actually asked, but did you have any like professional courses or anything, or was it all like
No.
just you looking at
So
recipe books or maybe YouTube videos or?
yeah, so I had no professional training. I've never done any sort of like catering course or catering college or anything like that. I think one thing about MasterChef is you're not actually allowed to have any professional experience, whether that be working in a kitchen, doing courses or anything. It is very much home cooked, it's amateurs. If you've
Mm.
got any experience, even working like in a kitchen in spoons, they sort of say, sorry, we can't accept your
Oh, okay,
application
I see.
experience working within a professional kitchen. So no, I've never worked behind a bar, never worked in a restaurant, never done any sort of waiting tables or anything. So it was like a complete like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to cook. My mum and dad taught me to cook, recipe books and sort of like YouTube videos and everything. That's how I learned essentially.
Mm. And did you like have any sort of barriers that you felt like got in your way when you were like me sitting there looking at this application like, oh, should I really do this?
I think the one thing that for me, which was like quite a big barrier, was I'm vegetarian.
Mm.
I'm not going to cook meat. I prefer not to cook fish. Now, within the episode, I did have to cook fish one time, and that was sort of like the producer's decision. They sort of like dished out the courses everyone had to do. And in a way, looking back, I'm quite grateful that they gave me the opportunity to cook with fish, because it made me sort of like push myself, which I never ever thought that I would, cook fish or cook meat. So it made me push myself, and it made me realize, okay, well, if I can do this, like I can probably do anything now. But yeah, looking through the application, I think that was for me like the bit that I was like, okay, is my food going to be good enough? Like, I'm plant based. Like, is it going to stand up to all of the people who cook meat and fish? But then I was like, well, on the other hand, I want to be able to showcase vegetarian food at its best and show people that you don't have to have meat or fish, and your dish can be just as spectacular without the meat and the fish. So yeah, it was sort of like a bittersweet moment, but I am glad that I did put in the application.
No, 100%. Did you feel like you like being like a vegetarian and cooking like like mainly vegetarian dishes that you had some sort of disadvantage on the show at all? Or
I don't think it was a disadvantage, because it was my personal opinion not to cook meat or fish. Now I know there's loads of vegetarians out there who do cook meat and fish. They just don't taste it and they just don't eat it themselves. So it was my opinion not to cook meat or fish because I just wanted to stay as true to myself as I possibly could. So I don't feel like it was a disadvantage as such, but I feel like I had to showcase, you know, vegetables and that food like to another level to sort of be on the same standard as meat or fish.
That's really interesting. It's like, I guess you have to show like your skills within that food have to be like a higher level, because it's like the taste is different to like meat or fish. Obviously, it's like, I guess you have to it makes you stand out, which I guess is a good way, because it like goes to the people that are judging the show and all that kind of thing. But it's also like helps you just like think more creatively, I guess.
Exactly, because it's like if you cook a piece of fish perfectly, or your meat is cooked perfectly, it's sort of like, well, that's the main element on the plate. You've done that, tick, like amazing. But it's like if you don't have that and all you're serving is essentially cauliflower or an aubergine or, you know, mushroom, it's like well, it makes me laugh because in the final sort of episode of MasterChef, like when you have to do your starter main and your dessert, I think Eddie, he did something like halibut with caviar and a beurre blanc sauce, which was like super expensive. And Pookie did a soup. You know, she did a Thai chicken soup. But it's like I did a mushroom, and I didn't even use like the head of the mushroom. I literally used the stem of a mushroom, and it just shows like, you know, like you said, like the invention and like the creativity of like taking a mushroom and using it in a way which like you wouldn't even expect it to sort of be used. So yeah, it was amazing to be able to showcase vegetables in just weird and wonderful ways, essentially.
Absolutely. We see like, so when you see like MasterChef on the TV, it's like very fast paced. Like there's a lot of intensity. Like, how was that like from the perspective of being on the show, and like if there was anything like of that intensity, was there anything that helped you get through it? Like anything that you learned from that?
I think like it's portrayed as being so intense when you watch it on the telly, and that's because it genuinely is. Like as soon as that time starts, you have got that time period to come up with a dish. You know, so many people from my MasterChef experience have been like, "Oh, is it like pre-recorded? Like, can you bring stuff in?" It's like, no. Everything that is presented at the end of the dish has been cooked within that time frame. Like, it's not like a little blue pizza moment where you can just be like, "Oh, here's what I made earlier." It's like everything that's cooked has been done there and then. So it is super, super intense, and it's like an exam at the end of the day. It's you've got so many people around you, so many different things are going on, but you are just focused on what's going on in front of you, and you've just got to get what you've got to do done. So essentially, it was super, super intense. Like you'd hear noises in the corner, and you just wouldn't even look up because you'd just be so focused on what you were cooking and what you were doing. But I think for me, the one thing that like kept me going and sort of like, you know, made me push myself was like I had the fear of time being up and all I had was like, you know, nothing to serve. I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? So I think for me it was sort of like, well, I want to obviously put something out to, you know, John and Greg and the rest of the guest judges, and I don't want it to be like an absolute sort of like disaster. I think that's what sort of like made me really focus and just sort of head down and concentrate. Yeah.
I guess the deadline of that time is like, okay, I have to get it done in this time. It's like I got kind of no choice. It's like, so you have to like kind of like plan, okay, I need to think, I have to get it done, so I have to do this and like.
Exactly. It's not like when you've got coursework which you get given at the start of the term, and then they say, oh yeah, it's not needed until like the end, you know, the end of the term, and it's like, oh, okay, I'll just sort of like put it off, and then like 2 days before you're like, oh, should really start this course now. It's like endless nights. It was nothing like that. It was like, okay, you've got a set time. This is the start. This is the finish. We need to get this done. So it was very much like, okay, if I'm going to perform, I'm going to perform now, and that's it.
Because I guess like cooking at home, you don't really have like the time pressures at all, really. Like it is kind of like coursework. So I guess going from like I don't want to say like coursework. This like analogy is very cheesy, but like compared to when you're like in the exam, like the MasterChef, was there kind of like any practice that you had, like you did before you joined the show, or did you maybe draw on some of the sort of stress management or any philosophies from the university potentially as well?
So you obviously like you put in your application and like you sort of like so you put in your application and like obviously, like, then it's like the whole process of like interviews and like more interviews face to face over the phone. So the more successful you are with them, the closer you get potentially to being on the show. So you can sort of like estimate how much practice you need to put in beforehand. So yeah, it was very much like practice, practice, practice at home. But then you also get set briefs. So you've got to almost like you can only practice so much, because the brief that you could be set could be something completely different that you've never done before. And I think we got set a brief, like let's say on the Friday, and then we would need to send that brief in, like the recipe, the method, all of the equipment, so like the home ec team can like get it, and then we were back in the studio Monday. So like we only had like a couple of days to really like practice and essentially like practice the dish we've never done before. So it was quite stressful at times, but it was an experience like no other. Like, how many people can say they've been in the MasterChef kitchen? But yeah, it was quite stressful.
Absolutely. So how do you feel like, so you're now like a graduate and you're like at university maybe a few years ago. How do you feel like your time when you were a student prepared you for like what you're doing now? So like when you was on MasterChef, or now like as sort of on your website, like you're practicing like as a private chef now. Like how do you feel like your time at university prepared you for where you are now?
So like, I studied a law degree, I've got an LLB honours award, and I'm now a private chef. You're probably thinking, well, she's obviously had a wasted degree. Like she's been to university, she's done a law degree, and now she's not going anywhere near law. Like that's obviously been a waste of time. But do you know what? It wasn't. It has not been a waste of time at all, because the skills that I've learned from my law degree are like they're transferable skills that I can sort of use in anyday life. For example, like the way I communicate, the way I listen, the way I approach like difficult or sensitive matters. It's like they are quite desirable skills as well within any workforce environment. So for me, it's like, yes, even though I've done a law degree and I'm now going to be a private chef, I've still learned transferable skills throughout my time at university, which I can obviously now put into the workplace. So yeah, it has been interesting. And when I was at uni, I never even saw those skills. Like I never saw these skills as, I'm going to be able to use the way I communicate later on in life. It was only after I graduated that I was like, okay, these are the skills I've got now, and they can be implemented in like any day of life.
It's very interesting because I think that we actually mentioned this quite a lot on this show, in saying that like the skills that you get from uni is a lot more important than the content that you're learning necessarily, because I feel like, I mean, from my own experience anyway at university, it's that you can always teach yourself content, but the skills take a lot of like time and effort. So I feel like there should be like a very big emphasis, especially if you're at university now, to like really put the time into recognizing where you can build these skills, rather than just studying for exams and then learning content that you will probably forget in your actual career.
Yeah, exactly. It's like university. I mean, I was very, very lucky and privileged that I went to boarding school. So for me, like I was able to gain a lot of, sort of like independence at quite a young age. But for the majority of people, and for many people, going to university is about moving away from home and sort of being self deficient. Really, it's about sort of like how to fend for yourself, essentially, making new friends. It's not like you're going into like secondary school and you're forced into your like tutor group and like you're forced to make friends because they're the people you spend every day with. It's like university, if you want to make friends, you have to go out and make them, because seminars and lecture theatres are so big. It's not like, oh, let's all go around the room and introduce yourself. You can't, because of the sheer mass of people on the course. So it's very much about, you've got to put yourself out there. Uni gives you those skills, like giving you the confidence and just sort of being like, okay, I need to do this, essentially, which nothing else really gives you, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like university, so it gives you this massive opportunity, like to do so many things, and it's all up to us to take that opportunity to do that. So like Luke said, the skills, the making friends, the doing extracurriculars, all that stuff is like, because like there's at one point in your life of university, there's not going to be all there's chances are there's not going to be so much going on all in one small location. Like, you know, like 200 societies, people like meeting up like 5 minutes away from you with specific interest. Like, there's like a massive interest there, and like you said, it's like up to us to put ourselves out there to make that possible.
Completely. And as well, it's like time management, because you could be like, oh, I want to do this society, I want to do this club, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. But then on top of that, you've also got the nightlife, because when you're at uni, you have to have a bit of a nightlife. But then you've also got your studies as well, which is like the whole, you know, it's the most important thing about going to uni. It's about getting a degree. So it's like, it's about time management, because yes, you want to go and make friends, yes, you want to go and have fun, but you can't just put all of your effort into, you know, the fun stuff like the socials and the clubs and all of the sort of like extra curricular activities. You've also got to manage your time for, like, you know, yourself and like your studies. So yeah, it really does teach you a lot of lessons.
It's like, it's one of those things that I think is a battle at university, trying to find that balance. And it's like, okay, I want to do this, but I also want to do that. I want to do like 100 other things. And it's like, I guess like with each year, like along the journey, you kind of like find more of your balance. And it's like, first year's like, there's not much emphasis on studying, but like third year's like much more emphasis, because like the percentage of your degree and I think that skills that it teaches us. It's like, when people say university, they put a big emphasis on the degree, but I feel like that's only like one side of the coin. I think like there's like all the other aspects is like so important as well.
Yeah. So like you two are both at uni now, aren't you?
Oh
like,
yeah.
So
go ahead, Alex.
yeah. So I'm currently on my placement year. So
okay.
I go back in September for my final year. So,
right.
And then Luke, you just finished right now?
Yeah, I finished my exams a couple of weeks ago, celebrating my final year of biochemistry. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's what we're doing anyway.
So yeah, we're now one graduate and one student insider. So maybe we'll have to change the name.
Of a crisis with the name right now, aren't we?
You know what? That's the thing, because you guys can obviously relate to what we're talking about. Because like, you know, I remember, like, I mean, I'm 23. I graduated in 2020. So yeah, you know,
that's still quite recent. I feel like.
Well, I graduated in 2020. However, I didn't have my graduation ceremony until 2022. So yeah.
Oh wow!
But it's like, I don't know. Don't get me started. We're just gonna skip that. But it's like, I remember when I was in first year, it was very much like you were saying, Alex. It was like, you know, I'm just gonna have fun, like do all of the socials, make loads of friends. But then when you get to second year and sort of like third year and fourth year and so on, you're sort of like, okay, I need to put a little bit more time into my academic now, because I've had fun, I've made friends, but I've come to uni to obviously get a degree. I want to get a good degree, so I need to sort of like put a percentage of work and effort into sort of studying. So yeah, it's about finding that balance essentially.
And I think
on the topic of time management, actually, like it's something we talked about a while back, and I talked about how like my approach of it is like Google Calendar, to-do list systems and stuff like that. How's your approach with like being able to like manage different like aspects of your life?
So like, I'm a very like visual learner. I like to sort of like have everything written out in front of me, and you know, it's all right when it's on the computer, but I like to actually like physically see it and touch it and write it out myself with like loads of different colours and pretty pens and everything. So for me, it was very much about having a wall calendar where I could shade out areas of being like, okay, I can do my hockey on this day, I can do the gym on these days, this is my study, like this is when I go to the library, and these are my lectures. Because I think in total I only had about 3 lectures a week. So it was very much like independent study, which you were required to do on your own. So what I would do is I'd get like a big wall calendar, and I'd make sure that I would like fill it in and really stick to it. So for me, I think it's important that people, and especially like students starting in September, like obviously try and manage their time a little bit. Otherwise, you're just going to tire yourself out too fast. You'll have energy for nothing, and that's not fair.
This reminds me of an analogy that we used before, saying that when you're joining university, if you're going to build like your house, kind of like your new skills and your new knowledge, you have to have a good foundation. before you come.
Exactly.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Exactly, yeah, because using that analogy, if you don't have good foundations, your house is just going to fall, it's going to crumble, and you're not going to get anywhere in life. If you've got good foundations, you can just build up from that. And then you can have yourself a nice little one bedroom, and then you can extend onto that and have like a nice little conservatory, little garden.
Living the best life.
It's about having the foundations and just sort of like concreting them in and setting them in and sticking to them really.
Just sort of linking back to the MasterChef, do you think there was what kind of foundations do you feel like you laid for yourself or developed maybe at university before you joined the show?
I think one of the major things for me was self-belief. So like I have got a lack of self-belief and a lack of self-confidence really. And for me, every single day, I would go into the MasterChef kitchen, and John Torode and I had a little connection because we both watched Ted Lasso. I'm not sure if any of you guys have like heard of Ted Lasso or like watched the series, but like one of the main things on Ted Lasso was about belief, like believe. So every morning before the cook, John Torode would come over to me and he'd be like, "What are you going to do today?" And I would say, "Believe," because I knew that if I believe in myself, that almost was like a little step up. It was almost like a little, okay, I know I can do this, now let's go and perform. Rather than from the start being like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, or I'm worried, and then having to sort of like have that on top of cooking. So yeah, for me, it was like having the foundation of, I know I can do this, self-belief, let's do this, let's go, let's cook. So yeah, that was probably my foundation, was just concreting into my own head that I can do this, like believe in yourself.
I guess having that sort of like that belief sort of very much short circuits a lot of like the anxiety or maybe the stress that you might have been feeling,
Yeah,
even before you've even started cooking or doing like one of the events. So
definitely. I mean, I think for me, I was really anxious because I was up against people who were like, they've been cooking for their entire life, and I'd only started cooking for such a short amount of time, and I was anxious because I was like, I don't know how my food's going to fare with all of these people who've been cooking for so long. They've got so many skills, and I've just come into the kitchen. So it's like, yeah, it was quite anxious at times, but I just pushed myself. I just sort of like went through the motions. And I was like, okay, I can do this. Let's believe in myself.
Absolutely, that really shows. I guess that really shows the importance of that mindset and how that like can like really have an impact on like the success or the outcome of whatever we're doing, and like just like going in with that positivity.
Definitely, because I think if you start off with positivity, you're only gonna like grow in confidence. Whereas, if you start off quite timid, quite anxious about what could happen, you're almost like setting yourself up to fail. Because it's like, if you don't believe in what you're doing and yourself, then you're gonna make everyone else around you feel like, you can't do it, and that's not a healthy environment.
I don't want to speak for you here, but do you also feel like the enjoyment of cooking itself was also a big driver for you to get through these very like stressful?
Yeah, massively. I mean, I'm dyslexic, so like when I was at school and when I was at uni, academic did not come naturally to me. I really, really, really had to sort of push myself and like sit down and focus and learn. But I'm very creative. Put me on a hockey field, put me like, in some sort of like drama studio or whatever, and I'll be happy. But for me, it was like all of my friends found their like little clique. I like to call it a little clique, where like you find something you're good at, you enjoy it, that's your little clique. And I hadn't found mine. I didn't find mine at school. I didn't find it at uni. And I was like, when am I going to find my clique? When am I going to find like my purpose? And it was being in the kitchen, and I was like, okay, I'm in the kitchen, I'm actually having fun with this, and I'm actually enjoying it. And that for me, that was my click. I was like, okay, I found my click. And it's like, I think what I want to be able to like show people is your click might not come straight away, but don't be worried about that. Don't be afraid about that, because it will come. If you put in time and effort, your click will come. Like, you will find it. So yeah, I think for me it was like just a massive relief and joy. It brought a massive smile on my face, and I was like, okay, I found what I'm good at now, and I'm enjoying it, and I can just go and do it and have fun.
I guess
That's
that's sort of,
that's really good.
sorry, Alex, but to sort of speaking about like the click that you mentioned, because I know you're going into sort of like the whole like private chef, have like a website, and this is you think the next direction for you?
Definitely. So I think for me, it's very much about what I can do now. I mean, yeah, I've got a law degree. I can go into law if I want to, but I don't want to do that. I very much do want to sort of go down the route of being a private chef. So like you said, I've got my website, and on my website, the sort of like what I'm offering is like essentially it's private dining, but within your own sort of like home. Because I think as well, like people are still a little bit scared with COVID about going to like public restaurants. So it's like I essentially offer that fine dining experience, but with like within the comfort of your own home. So whether that be like a 3-course meal, a 7-course tasting menu, 5-course tasting menu, barbecue, sort of cocktail parties, I can cater for like any event. And essentially, it's just like making sure that the people I'm serving for, the clients essentially are happy and they feel comfortable and confident and everything like that. So yeah, doing the whole private dining, set up my own company, which is the Spicy Flexitarian. Um, but yeah, with that, I also want to do maybe like I want to bring out some cookbooks as well, maybe a bit of like TV or radio, and then the one thing as well which has been playing on my mind a little bit is public speaking, because like for me, I'm not a natural public speaker. However, I feel like the experience that I've had and my actual journey of like growing and the confidence is one that I feel like a lot of people need to hear, because they themselves may be going through like the same situation, and especially with coming from like an Asian background. So like my mum's side of the family is like Indian, my dad's side of the family is like English. But like with being like from that Asian background, there is still that like stereotypical you've got to do a professional degree still. And I feel like for me, I sort of made that change. And I was like, I'm not going to do a professional degree. I'm going to go and do something I love and enjoy. And nowadays, it doesn't matter what you do, because whether that be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, an accountant, they're all like what would be classed as like professional careers. However, nowadays with the growth of like society and what's out there, it doesn't matter what career path you go down, because the experience is phenomenal. Like the pay is just as much as any other. So it's very much about sharing that and just following your dreams essentially, and not being afraid to sort of like make that change.
Absolutely. I guess it really shows the power of tech and the internet as well. Is because, like, for example, you said you saw like the advert for MasterChef. That's like the power of marketing for
Yeah,
you to then apply to it, or like say this recording even power of Instagram. And it's like,
exactly. It's like I would never have like been in contact with you guys if it wasn't for Instagram, and I think that's great. I love to see like social media being used in like a positive way, because you see so much negativity about, especially like the young generation and social media, and it's like that's not what it should be focused on. It should be focused on the positives of social media, which is like connecting and communicating and self growth and like helping each other out essentially, which is what we're both doing.
yeah, 100%. So like even on like slight segue we were saying about social media, something me and Luke have talked about a lot before actually, about like intentionality with it. And I guess that really shows like the positive side of it, like you say, focusing on the positive, and like how, because obviously there's people that maybe like spend a lot of time on social media, so there's like the whole social media addiction thing, but there's also like on the flip side there is a lot of positivity if I guess we're more intentional with how we use it.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I'm not gonna sort of like sit back and say, oh, I don't use social media, because I do. I get ready for bed, and then I'm just hours just scrolling on social media. Like, who doesn't do that? Everyone pretty much does that nowadays. But it's about the content you take in, and it's about the content that you see, and sort of using that effectively. So like, what I've done is like, I've set up different accounts. So like on my Instagram, I've got my private one, but I've also got my business one. And like on the business one, I make sure that I follow only sort of like business accounts that are like influential to me. So other restaurants, other food sort of like bloggers and everything like that. And it means that when I want to sort of, within the working day, when I want inspiration, when I want to connect with those people, I can go onto that account and I can sort of scroll through that. But then when I want to relax, I can go onto my private account and sort of like scroll through loads of like makeup things and clothing things and all of that. So it's like, it's about having that time essentially for yourself. It's about, like we were saying earlier, it's about managing that time and using social media to benefit yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause, like, even in terms of like learning now, like we can learn so much from the internet. Like we can like, there's so many resources out there, and I guess that is like one of the big advantages of the internet is like we can just self-teach ourselves so many things. Like I self-taught myself how to like video edit just by like watching YouTube videos and doing it myself. Like there's so many things we can just like we don't have to go get like go through a whole training from another company or something. You can just like hop on Google and find the answer to your question.
Exactly. And as well, the majority of that sort of like training and sort of like learning, it's free. You've got YouTube, you've got Google, you've got sort of like little how-to videos on Instagram. It's all free. It's at our fingertips. And I feel like people are afraid because it's like people are like, oh, I'm doing sort of like this degree. I've got to do this degree. I can't do anything else. It's like, no, you can do many degrees. Like my mum and dad, they're like, early 50s. They're both still students. Like it's about sort of like not being afraid to like still learn and still sort of like teach yourself and like self grow. So yeah, it's incredible like what social media can sort of like do for someone's career essentially.
Yeah, I think that's very very insightful. I think it quite links back quite nicely to what we were mentioning earlier about not just focusing on your exams and your degree, like really branching out to these societies and all these amazing things that are going on when you're at university, and even cooking for you was a branch out as well. So
A massive branch out.
yeah,
Gosh,
and look where it's led though.
I think when I was at uni, my diet literally consisted of takeaways and cheese toasties, which isn't very healthy. But it just shows, like, you can literally have a complete career change. And yeah, as long as you're like willing to put in the time and the effort, it can completely change your life. And, sometimes for the better. Like, I'm so much more happier doing what I'm doing now than reading loads of case reports.
I guess
Absolutely, yeah.
for anyone that's at uni at the moment and is currently stuck eating cheese toasties every week, then we can put a link to all of your your website, your Instagram, so they can learn some some
Well,
fantastic recipes.
what? That's what I want to be able to do. I obviously like had the whole diet of a student, which is, it's typically like takeaways and like really, really like unhealthy food. But like I want to be able to show like students or even really, really busy people within their careers that you don't need to splash out on ingredients and you don't need to have so many hours spare in the kitchen. Like you can still create a really, really healthy, nutritious, delicious dinner within like 30 minutes. And I think as well with like, on a more serious note, like with the whole like, you know, the cost of living going up and obviously like the cost of food going up, it is really, really difficult for people to obviously like source food. And I know that food poverty is on the rise, but I want to be able to showcase, vegetarian food, which is, vegetables are typically cheaper than meat and fish, and be able to showcase that, like that it's cost effective and it doesn't take that long to sort of like do. I think for me that's like a massive, massive like thing that I want to be able to show people is that entire process really.
Yeah, like 100%, and we'll put every link that we can find from your from all of your content that you put out into our show notes so that people can go and check some of that stuff out.
I mean,
It was interesting that you mentioned, like, I didn't really think about this, but like with the the cost of living rising and the cost of food like rising, that this is having an impact on people's like health and their diets. I didn't really consider that as something that could be happening.
well, I mean, I can only, like obviously I'm not at uni anymore, and I'm very lucky that I'm living with my mum and dad at the moment. But I don't want to start to think about students who have to pay rent and also are in charge of doing their own grocery shopping. And the one thing for me is I don't want students to, or even like general public, I don't want them to feel like that they can't obviously like they have to like skip meals essentially because they can't afford it. It's like don't skip your meals because that's not going to have a positive impact on your mental health and your own sort of like well-being. You don't need to go out and spend so much money on like meat and fish because you can still have a really really balanced nutritious diet using vegetables and using sort of like pulses and grains and stuff. But yeah, food's not just about sort of like eating. It's also about like the effect it has on your mental health and like the energy levels essentially.
Yeah, no, 100%. I guess as a scientist, I can definitely vouch for the fact that a diet does have a very big impact on your body. I guess like just to parallel to what I've kind of seen, I think as a student anyway, I see a lot of skipped meals and a lot of very cheap meals, and I think that the problem is with the cheaper like ingredients is that they generally cost a lot more than
Mm.
like the veg and all these other like better ingredients that are better for you, like they're more healthy alternatives, and I find that quite a, like a bad thing. I'm not sure why that is,
Yeah,
but
I think it's the whole mentality. It's like, oh, I've just finished a lecture and I've got like this society tonight, and it's like, oh, I don't have time, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick like a pot noodle or like a Uncle Ben's rice in the microwave. It's like I think they cost like £3-4, whereas like a potato and a cauliflower I think cost like what 79p or something.
mm,
It's like it's little changes like that that can really really help a weekly budget. But it's just knowing what to do with a potato and a cauliflower when you buy it. Don't
yeah,
just say use it raw. It's about knowing what to do with it essentially. So I just want to be able to like show people this is what you can do with a cauliflower. This is what you can do with a potato. Here's an aubergine. This is what you can do with that. It's just about that. It's just about little things like that, really. Just about
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting because like you like showing like providing the value to people that are following you online, like to like say this is I was in this situation like I was a student or whatever, like and now I'm cooking and like here's what you could do and provide value to people that are watching you. I think that's interesting.
yeah, exactly. And I'm not naive about anything. Like I know when you're a student, I know when you're that age, you think you know everything. You're like, oh, I'm not going to listen to anyone. I know what I'm doing. I'm fine. But it's like I've been in that situation. I've been where you are, and like I know what you're feeling. I know what you're going through. I can relate to it. So it's very much like listen because trust me, I know what you're going through. But yeah, it's just amazing to be able to give people the whole experience and just make sure that they're taking the right path and not sort of like verging off down a really really unhealthy route.
Great, absolutely. So um next thing is like if on your like journey and stuff, like who have been like your biggest inspirations so far and like why?
So I think for me like I said earlier, being in the kitchen and cooking, it should be fun. It shouldn't feel like a chore. It should be like enjoyable. And I think for me, like the one person who springs to mind of making food fun and enjoyable is Nadia Hussein, who was on the Great British Bake Off, I think, several years ago. And her food is just so enjoyable. Like it's so much fun. And I love her whole mentality of it's like I can and I will. Like her mentality is I can do this and I will do it. um, so yeah, I really love Nadia Hussein. Like she's a massive inspiration to me, and as well, obviously she's a woman within like the food industry, so it's like very much about like female empowerment, like all of that. But obviously, like living in Yorkshire as well, I've got to sort of say like James Martin as well. He's a Yorkshireman through and through, and his food is just so simple. There's nothing sort of fancy about it. It's just home cooked, delicious food, which is what I essentially stand for as well. There's really nothing fancy about my food. You know, if you ask sort of like any Indian household, like the food they have is the food that I cook. Like dal and rice is just a staple dish within any Indian household. It's like a weekly dinner. nothing fancy about it. So I think for me, like, my two main inspirations are like Nadia Hussain, just because of her whole philosophy and mentality, and just the way she makes food fun, and obviously James Martin, just because of how like relaxed and chilled out he makes cooking essentially. So I think for me, they're two like really, really quite big inspirations, and like, you know, I just want my food to be able, you know, to be like theirs essentially, like to be fun.
Awesome. And also can't forget Chef Gusteau from Ratatouille as
Uh,
well.
of course.
I think I'll ask another question, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
I'll say, just as we're kind of, I guess we're reaching about the hour mark now, so I think it's got to sort of bring in some conclusions. But I think obviously, because this is the Student Insider and we're like a student-based podcast, do you have
Yeah.
sort of any advice for any students that are trying to figure out the next steps for themselves, and maybe are in a similar position to you, where you know they were like at the end of their degree and they were like, you know what, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like I said earlier on, being dyslexic, I had to work quite hard on my academic studies. Like, it took me a little bit longer to sort of like pick things up. Um, and you know, I can relate to like the stress of end of year exams and the pressure that, you know, you may feel like your family can put on you, but more so like the pressure that you put on yourself. Like, I can relate to that. I've been there, but like for me, it's it's about believing in yourself. You know, you've really got to sort of like believe in yourself, and like hearing from both John and Greg that my food was good enough. That for me was like the belief I needed. That for me sort of like opened my eyes and made me realize, okay, I can do this. And it's about not giving up. It's about finding something you love, and it's about doing it. You know, every industry that you go down nowadays, it's competitive. You know, and it's whether you go down the food industry or, you know, doctor, lawyer, accountant, you know, film producer, it's competitive. But you have to have belief in yourself. Otherwise, if you don't have belief in yourself, nobody else will. And it's about having that balance of being confident but not arrogant. So I think for me, like, the advice I can give to current students and recent graduates is, you know, believe in yourself, have confidence, but if you're not enjoying it, don't be afraid to hold your hands up and make change. I mean, one of the I've actually got a book next to me at the moment, which is a book that I started today actually, and it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. And you know, I've only just started this book today, but it's true. It's about feeling the fear, but doing it anyway. You know, you're fearful of so many things, but go out and do it, because if you just sit back and let fear take over, you're not going to enjoy life.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's they're like the probably like the three little tips I'd give like any student and anyone really in any day to day life.
Yeah, no, amazing. It actually reminds me of something I heard from Terry Crews recently on a podcast he was on, and he said that basically everything's becoming like very sportified, in that sort of everything is just like, as you mentioned, like everything's just becoming so competitive, and it can be, you know, it can be very fearful to try and, you know, get into like these, you know, these sports or anything, you know, like even cooking, and not feeling the like feeling the fear, and being like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough for this. But I think what I've sort of been trying to like teach myself anyway is that, you know, it's more about having fun than
Yeah,
about being competitive. I think it's okay to, like, you know, like I do sports, but I don't have to be like an Olympian. You know, it's okay. I can
yeah,
still do it and enjoy it.
exactly. And it's like, you know, I'm a sportsman myself, so I play hockey. So
Mm.
it's like I can relate to, you know, the competitiveness of being in a team, you know, being on a sports field. However, you don't have to be competitive throughout your entire life. There's a time and place, you know. When you need to be competitive, which is, you know, for example, at interviews or on a sports pitch, you know, they are times where you can be competitive. But like, you know, otherwise enjoy life, have fun. Because if you're not having fun, if you're not enjoying life, then what essentially is the point, you know? So yeah, it's definitely about having fun, believing in yourself, and just like being, you know, it's all right to be fearful, but do it anyway. Because
Yeah.
if you want to, do it. don't sit back and like let fear take over. I think one thing that springs to my mind is I'm awful on roller coasters. Hate them. I do not like roller coasters at all. However, my friendship group love them, and like I always used to just be like, "Oh, you go on the roller coaster. I'll just stay and watch the bags." But it got to the point where I was missing out on all of the fun. They'd go on the roller coaster and they'd come off and they'd be talking about it. They'd have that adrenaline rush, and I wouldn't. So that for me, it was like, I went on roller coasters and now I love them. Like I saw the fear, but then I faced it anyway. So it's about, and I know it's only like a little example, which isn't major, but it's little things like that. And as well, like relating it back to like starting uni, you might be shy, you might have lack of confidence, you might be fearful of like putting yourself out there, introducing yourself to people, and be like, "Hi, my name's this. This is the course I'm doing." But it's like if you don't, you're not going to have fun at uni because you're going to be on your own, and uni should be an enjoyable experience that everyone shares together. And I think for me, remember that you might be fearful, but everyone as well in that entire like sort of like cohort, they're going through the same thing you're going through. So the likelihood is they're also feeling fearful as well. So it's like you're not the only one out there, You may look at yourself and be like, "Oh, I'm the only one feeling like this," but the likelihood is you're not. So yeah, just have fun.
I think that's a really good. That's a really good
great philosophies.
like takeaway lesson there. Like like experience the fear and do it anyway. Like it's like the first step. I always think is the hardest. Once you've taken that that initial tiny step, the rest of it is so much easier. So I think that's definitely very interesting.
It's like going to the gym. I mean, how many of us have been like, "Oh, it's the start of the new year, let's sort of like go to the gym." And it's tough for the first couple of weeks. It's really, really tough, sort of like going to the gym, getting up, doing all of the motions. But then after those 2 weeks, it becomes fun because you've got endorphins going around your body and you're actually having a great time. So yeah, it's about sort of like, it will take time. It will be a new change. But afterwards, it's going to be a great experience.
I think both of those, like the gym and the roller coaster analogy, were like really great to kind of portray this point. I think it'll be like for anyone that maybe is a bit fearful and has like trouble like facing their fears, maybe going to Thorpe Park and hopping on the scariest thing would be a good like exercise to practice. I don't know.
Small steps first.
Oh, maybe something more mild.
But no, it's very much like, I feel like that is like a little philosophy that I sort of like stick with, and it's really, really helped me. It really, really has helped me completely.
Awesome. Okay, great. We're coming near to the end. Before we finish, we have got like a few rapid fire questions that we're going to ask.
Okay.
So I hope you're ready. No. Does that sound all right? Does that sound good?
Yeah, no, yeah? It should be fun.
Okay, great. Okay, so something completely different. What is one of your favourite films of all time?
Top Gun. The first one. Not the new Maverick that's come out, Top Gun. The original.
Great. Luke, do you want to take the next question? Do you want to read it?
This might link into what we mentioned a minute ago, but what one book would you recommend others to read, fiction or non-fiction?
Definitely.
Same book.
Yeah. Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's an incredible. I've only just started it, but I feel like it's going to really, really be quite beneficial.
Great.
Awesome.
And if you could have a billboard with anything on it, anything at all, what would it be and why?
That's a good question. I like that one.
You know what? For me, it would be a billboard full of like positive affirmations, just to sort of like get me, start me off in the day, put me in a good mood. That would probably be like a billboard for me of like really, really just positive affirmations. Like, you can do it, believe in yourself, like essentially like feel the fear and do it anyway. Little things like that can just get you started in the day. Yeah.
Awesome. And if you could have if you could have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would it be and why? Or one. Okay. If it's too hard.
Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter. The Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. And Olaf from Frozen.
Interesting choices.
Yeah, a really weird bunch. However, like each of those little characters, like I feel like I can relate to in my personality, and I just feel like it would be such an enjoyable and crazy little sort of like meal. So yeah, those three.
Oh no, that's interesting. I think that's the first time I've like ever heard like anyone answer that question with like fictional characters rather than like actual like celebrities. Mm.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shows you a little bit of how crazy and silly my brain is, but yeah.
I guess that is really interesting because it just shows like everyone's unique perspective and like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I feel like it'd just be an absolute laugh at the table with those three.
Okay, great. Okay, you got any other questions, Luke?
I think we're all good. Unless Radha, do you have any questions or any last statements that you want to throw out there?
No, I mean, I've loved doing this, and like, I hope you've got some good content that you can put
Yeah,
together.
no, of course. I think we've had a great discussion so far, like the MasterChef and also stuff for students, which relates very heavily to our podcast. But no, thank you so much for your time and for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too as well. It's been incredible. And like, if I'm ever down, like I'll sort of like drop me a message. But let's go for a coffee.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds good.
maybe a dinner would be lovely if you can cook.
Oh, am I cooking it? Am I cooking it? No,
Okay.
of course it'll be incredible.
Okay, perfect. All right, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We hope you did enjoy it. We'll link all of your stuff down below. Website, social medias, anything. We'll link all of that down below. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast to anyone listening on Apple Podcasts, especially. Boost it in the algorithm. Yeah, we're on all podcast platforms. If you're watching this on YouTube, we are also on audio platforms. If you're listening on audio, we're also on YouTube. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Any last thoughts from anyone?
No, awesome. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming on, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Amazing.